The warship Orion's Fong hovered in low orbit over the smoking remnants of Kessler 4, its polished hull catching the dying sun like a blade poised for the final cut. Commander Zerath Kothuan stood with hands clasped behind his back, his posture precise, the embodiment of alien military efficiency. Below him, through the massive viewport, another human colony burned, a familiar spectacle, yet one he watched with the same mild disinterest a scholar might give a dust-covered tome. Another primitive nest silenced, murmured his adjutant, her tone laced with reverence. Zerath didn't nod. He rarely wasted movement when words could cut sharper. Predictable, he said. Humanity falls like wet paper. Their cities crumble. Their courage evaporates the moment our banners blot out their skies. There was no laughter from the officers gathered on the command deck. Alien soldiers didn't laugh on duty. But satisfaction hummed in the air, a silent pulse of shared arrogance. Conquest had become routine, almost tedious. Humanity's colonies offered no real fight. Skirmishes, yes, but nothing to test the Empire's might. Zerath had begun to suspect this war would be remembered less as a campaign and more as a formality. That suspicion deepened as the tactical display updated with reports. Fewer human ships sighted, fewer weapons fired in anger. Some colonies barely even sent distress calls anymore. Surrender or extinction had become predictable outcomes. It was only the order in which they arrived that varied. Zerath turned from the viewport, violet eyes narrowing as his adjutant approached again, this time with urgency leaking through her rigid posture. Long-range scouts had detected another human world, she said, placing a holomap between them. High biosignature density. Urban clusters, primitive satellites. The designation matches. Earth. Earth. The word carried weight even in the alien tongue, though none aboard the Orion's Fong quite understood why. Zerath studied the hologram, a blue and green orb turning slowly, almost tauntingly. Their cradle world, he mused. The origin of this stubborn infestation. Another officer stepped forward, tail twitching in irritation. Shall we mobilize a standard assault fleet, Commander? Standard. Zerath's lip curled faintly. They're barely holding their outposts. Their homeworld will fall like all the others. Assemble a strike group. No need to waste an armada on this ritual. The adjutant hesitated. Commander, it is possible this world will fight harder than the others. Zerath's gaze slid to her like a blade, unsheathed. Possible, he said softly, is the word weak minds use before retreat. Prepare the assault. The order carried through the Orion's Fong with practice speed. Warships adjusted course. Landing craft began final checks. Weapon arrays shifted toward readiness. Earth spun slowly on the hologram, unaware or uncaring that it had drawn the Empire's eye. When the fleet descended hours later, they found the planet frustratingly silent. No human fleets rose to challenge them in orbit. The few satellites encountered were ancient, half-broken things transmitting meaningless signals. Pathetic, one alien officer muttered as landing parties deployed. Zerath watched the first ground reports come in with faint contempt. Resistance was scattered. Civilian populations fled rather than fought. Human soldiers skirmished, then retreated into forests or cities, rarely standing their ground. Entire sectors surrendered after brief firefights. It felt like victory should, but it didn't. The first real disturbance came from a ruined transport hub outside a city the humans called Jakarta. A human female was captured after detonating charges beneath an alien supply crawler. She was brought aboard the Orion's Fong under heavy guard, wrists bound, face streaked with dust and sweat but eyes steady. Too steady for someone in chains. Zerath regarded her with mild curiosity when she was hauled before him. Name, he asked through the translator. She didn't answer. Rank? Faction. Silence again, but her gaze flicked briefly to the guards around her. Measuring. Calculating. Another feral partisan, Zerath said, almost sighing. He gestured toward the holding cells. Interrogate her. If she resists, break her. We have no time for human theatrics. The guards obeyed. 10 minutes later, alarm screamed through the Orion's Fong. Zerath strode into the brig personally, irritation sharpening into disbelief as he found 3 of his guards strewn across the deck, unmoving, armor dented inward like paper crushed in a fist. The human woman was gone. She was unarmed. One surviving guard stammered, clutching a broken limb. "We searched her twice." Zerath knelt briefly beside one of the fallen soldiers. The angle of the neck. The force required. It hadn't been panic or luck. It was precision. He rose slowly, the hum of alarms echoing down the corridors. "One human," he said softly, "does not matter." But even as he spoke, the thought coiled at the back of his mind. One human shouldn't have been able to do this at all. Night fell across Earth as search parties spread through abandoned districts and empty highways. The woman remained at large. Intercepted transmissions hinted at organized resistance cells where none should have existed. Entire supply lines vanished overnight, trucks, weapons, even personnel. Reports filtered in of human forces using tactics unseen in prior campaigns. Guerrilla strikes. Precision sabotage. Alien patrols disappearing in city ruins without a trace. Zerath studied the growing data with mounting annoyance. None of it suggested a conventional enemy. It suggested preparation. "Sir," his adjutant said carefully one evening, "perhaps this world isn't what it appears." Zerath didn't look away from the reports. Bridges collapsing exactly when alien convoys crossed. Communications cut seconds before coordinated strikes. Human fighters emerging from nowhere, vanishing again before reinforcements arrived. "Every world falls," Zerath said at last, voice iron steady. "This one will too." But his eyes lingered on the hollow map of Earth long after the adjutant left. In the silence of the command deck, for the first time in many campaigns, Zerath Cawthon felt something unfamiliar coil coldly in his chest. Not doubt. Not yet. Something quieter. Something patient. As if the prey had been waiting for the hunter all along. Rain swept across the silent streets of New Shanghai, hissing against the alien landing craft scattered through the city like metallic carrion birds. From the Orion's Fong, Commander Zerath watched the feeds with growing irritation. Entire districts had been evacuated before his forces arrived. What humans remained moved like ghosts, appearing briefly, vanishing before patrols could corner them. For all their vaunted technology, his troops were chasing shadows through an empty metropolis. On the 3rd day, communications began to fail. At first it was dismissed as weather interference. Then entire relays went dark. Drone swarms dropped from the skies as though their circuits had been scoured clean. Patrols lost contact mid-sentence. An orbital scanner transmitted one final image of the Pacific before its feed dissolved into static, a network of lights blooming on the ocean surface, then vanishing as though swallowed by the sea. Zerath studied that image longer than he meant to. The lights had formed a pattern. Deliberate. Calculated. That was when the message arrived. It wasn't intercepted chatter. It wasn't a distress call. It came across every alien channel at once, smooth and calm in the Empire's own tongue. "You shouldn't have come here." For words, spoken with unsettling clarity, as though the speaker knew exactly how they would sound echoing through the corridors of the Orion's Fong. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Zerath ordered a trace. No origin point. No carrier signal. It was as though the words had simply materialized inside their systems. For the first time in his career, Zerath did not feel like the hunter. By nightfall, the woman who had escaped his brig struck again. Security footage showed her sliding through a rain-slick alley, planting charges along an armored transport before disappearing into the haze. The blast erased half a platoon. Survivors reported she moved without fear, without hesitation. One described her eyes as calculating, like a surgeon's. Zerath watched the footage in silence. He had seen assassins before, saboteurs, insurgents on a dozen worlds. But this woman fought with a precision that suggested training, not desperation. Not a random partisan, then. A soldier. Maybe more. He ordered her capture redoubled. Every squad in the district received her image. Search patterns tightened. Drones swept the skies with thermal sensors. She still slipped through. By the end of the week, whispers spread among the troops, superstitions muttered in mess halls about the Phantom of Earth. Some claimed she could vanish into walls. Others swore she turned entire squads against each other with tricks of light and sound. One patrol refused to deploy entirely after finding 3 comrades strung up in a warehouse, alive but disarmed, each with the same message carved into the wall above them. Go home. Zerath crushed that rumor personally, but unease gnawed at his command. Discipline faltered at the edges. Soldiers twitched at shadows. Officers grew terse on comms. Something intangible pressed against the invasion like a rising tide. And yet the Empire's war machine ground on. Cities fell. Defenses crumbled. From orbit, it still looked like victory. But the casualty reports told another story. Raiding parties lost, convoys destroyed, officers assassinated in their own camps. It was too precise to be chance. His adjutant brought him fragments of captured human data one evening, historical records, cultural archives, war footage spanning centuries. Zerath skimmed them with idle curiosity at first. Trench warfare in mud-soaked fields under alien skies to these people, yet ordinary to them. Cities consumed in nuclear fire. Fleets scuttled rather than surrendered. Soldiers fighting on with limbs gone, bleeding out just to buy minutes for retreating comrades. It wasn't desperation. It was endurance weaponized. One clip held Zerath's gaze longer than the rest. Black and white footage of human soldiers dragging artillery through snowdrifts taller than themselves. Their enemies froze where they fell. The humans kept marching. They've been fighting each other longer than we've existed as a species, the adjutant murmured, almost to herself. Zerath didn't answer. He watched the images flicker past, jungles burning, submarines vanishing beneath gray waves, satellites shattering above deserts where soldiers still fired rifles from trenches below. History as litany, violence as constant. And all this before they ever looked outward to the stars. Sir, the adjutant said quietly, what if we've mistaken restraint for weakness? He turned sharply. You think they've been holding back? I think, she said carefully, we may have woken something they buried. Something they didn't want to need again. The thought lingered like smoke. That night, as the alien fleet regrouped above Earth, 3 more supply transports vanished without distress calls. Patrol routes turned up empty. A captured officer slit his own throat rather than answer questions. Zerath didn't sleep. He stood before the viewport, watching storm fronts crawl across the planet below, lightning illuminating continents like nerves firing beneath skin. It should have been another conquest. Routine. Predictable. The Empire had crushed civilizations spanning half the galaxy. None had fought like this. The woman eluded capture for another week. Each day she struck somewhere new. Fuel depots, relay towers, command posts. Each time she left survivors, always enough to tell the story. Always enough to spread fear. One evening, she broadcast again. Not to the troops this time. Directly to Zerath. Go home, she said. Same calm tone. Same unshaken cadence. While you still can. Zerath played the message twice. 3 times. He searched her voice for anger, threat, anything he could use to categorize this enemy. There was nothing. No hate. No fear. Just certainty. When dawn came, a quarter of his outer patrols failed to report in. That was when the realization settled, cold and heavy as the rain still sweeping Earth's cities. The Empire wasn't hunting anything anymore. It was being herded. The High Council chamber on Vorinth Prime glittered with silver spires and banners stitched from the hides of extinct beasts, symbols of an empire convinced of its own permanence. Holographic projections of Earth hovered above the center dais as admirals, ministers, and counselors shouted across one another, voices sharpened by fear they refused to name. Commander Zerath Kothoan stood rigid at the center, armor scorched from weeks of ground campaigns, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. He had been summoned to explain why a species without interstellar fleets had stalled the Empire's march across their cradle world. One minister, scales polished to a mirror's shine, spat the accusation first. You commanded 5 legions, 3 carriers. orbital supremacy. And yet this infestation persists? Entire units missing, supply line shattered? Are we at war with primitives or phantoms, Commander? Zerath met his gaze, without flinching. Primitives do not coordinate precision strikes across 3 continents. They do not cripple carriers in orbit while ground forces vanish without a trace. This is not chaos. It is strategy. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some counselors scoffed openly. Others glanced uneasily at the casualty projections climbing along the walls. Earth bleeds you because you allow it, another minister said coldly. Crush them. Burn their world to ash if you must. The Empire will not be mocked by savages with scavenged rifles. Zerath could have agreed. It would have been easy. Safe. But the words would not come. He remembered the broadcast voice telling him to go home. He remembered human war footage, centuries of killing perfected long before they built starships. He remembered the bodies of his soldiers strung up beneath that single warning carved into concrete. Go home. Kneeling to Empire tradition, he said instead, reinforcements. Fleet scale. If this war is to be ended quickly, I require the full weight of the Empire. The chamber erupted. Some shouted support, voices edged with desperation. Others laughed bitterly at the idea of diverting fleets from border campaigns to handle one unaligned world. One counselor, old and scarred from wars fought before Zerath's birth, raised his voice above the din. Listen to him. You think this species broken because it bleeds. I tell you, wolves bleed, too, when cornered. It does not mean their teeth are gone. But arrogance clung stubborn as rust. In the end, promises of half measures were all Zerath received. Token ships, political assurances, nothing close to the storm he knew was coming. He returned to the Orion's Fong with orders to finish what he had started. The first human counterstrike came 2 days later. It began with the Empire's supply convoys blinking off long-range scans one by one. Entire chains of transports vanished between jump points without distress calls, as though devoured by the dark itself. Then came the fleets. They did not arrive through conventional lanes. They unfolded from wormholes blooming like black flowers in the void, sleek angular ships bristling with weapons arrays no Empire intelligence had ever catalogued. Zerath stood on the command deck as the first human salvos tore through his outer pickets. Orbital cannons mounted on repurposed asteroids ignited his support frigates before they even aligned shields. Automated drone swarms slipped through defense nets, moving like schools of fish around lumbering Empire cruisers before slicing engines from their hulls. No speeches. No demands. Just clinical, surgical violence. Zerath ordered counterfire. Human ships dispersed before the volleys landed, regrouping with mathematical precision to strike elsewhere. It felt less like fighting an enemy and more like being dissected by something vast and unseen. The woman appeared again during the chaos. She boarded one of his destroyers personally, cutting through its corridors with the strike team moving so fast internal cameras caught only fragments, flashes of gunfire, soldiers dropping without cries, doors sealing behind them like closing jaws. When the destroyer detonated against its own carrier minutes later, Zerath realized she hadn't come for territory. She'd come to break their nerve. And it was working. Reports flooded in, legions cut off planetside, officers vanishing, entire comms networks hijacked to broadcast a single human message across every channel in the Empire's own tongue. Leave. Zerath watched the word burn across fleet displays, across helmets, across the walls of his own command deck. He had believed at first this war would teach humanity fear. Now, as the Orion's Fong shuddered under another precision strike from nowhere, he felt the balance tilt fully. Not just fear. Dread. The kind that sank deeper than battle losses or damaged pride. The kind that whispered of predators too patient to waste strength roaring when silence killed more surely. He thought of the council back on Vorinth Prime, smug behind their banners and silver spires. He wondered how many days remained before human fleets appeared above that glittering capital the same way they had above Earth, quietly, without warning, without mercy. For the first time since the campaign began, Zerath Cawthon felt the shape of defeat coiling toward him, inevitable as the dark between stars. The Orion's Fong limped through blackened space, engines coughing light as it retreated toward the Empire's core worlds. What remained of Commander Zerath's fleet followed in fractured silence, half of it gone, the other half too battered to form proper battle lines. Across the flagship's command deck, crew members moved with the hollow-eyed focus of soldiers who had watched their Empire's invincibility peel away like rust under acid. Zerath stood at the viewport, hands locked behind his back. He had not changed armor in 3 days. Plasma scarring striped the once pristine plates. A hairline fracture marked his helmet where shrapnel had kissed it hours earlier. The crack felt appropriate, like a mirror showing him what the Council would never admit. They were not fighting savages. They were fighting something older, colder, and infinitely more patient. The first reports from the core worlds arrived before they reached orbit. Human fleets were no longer confined to Earth's skies. They struck deep now, methodically carving through the Empire's border defenses with an efficiency that spoke of long-laid plans unfolding exactly as intended. Wormhole incursions over mining moons. Sabotage on orbital foundries. Political command centers falling silent mid-broadcast. Humanity did not waste words. They did not issue ultimatums or demand treaties. They dismantled the Empire the way a surgeon excises rot, piece by piece, cutting away power until only nerve endings remained to carry the pain back to the heart. The Council summoned Zerath again, this time not to question but to plead. Generals demanded strategies. Ministers demanded answers. He gave them none. What strategy halts a knife already at your throat? One by one, the core fleets fell. Entire sectors went dark as human incursions spread like cracks through glass. The council chambers themselves descended into chaos. Some argued for surrender, others for retaliation. No one could deliver. Zerath watched them fight among themselves, voices shrill beneath the cold inevitability closing in from the stars. When the humans finally appeared above Vorinth Prime, they came without fanfare. No warning salvo, no demand for terms. One moment the skies above the capital glittered with the Empire's banners. The next, they were eclipsed by human warships sliding from wormholes like blades from sheaths. Every gun in orbit targeted them. None fired. Power grids shut down before the order could be given. Human drones cut communications so cleanly that even ground troops could only watch as the Empire's sky filled with silent predators. Zerath stood on the palace balcony as human landing craft descended in perfect formation. No chaos. No wasted motion. He expected thunder. Instead, they brought silence, heavy as a shroud. The woman emerged first. The same one who had left 3 of his guards in broken heaps back on Earth. Dust streaked her armor, but her movements carried the same calm precision that had haunted reports for weeks. Soldiers flanked her, disciplined, faceless, efficient. She stopped before Zerath as though they had arranged this meeting rather than fought a war to reach it. "Will you kill us?" he asked, voice steady despite the ruin around him. Her visor retracted, revealing the same expressionless focus she had worn in every grainy image from the field. "No," she said simply. The council behind him erupted, demands, accusations, desperate bargains tripping over one another. She ignored them all, eyes never leaving Zerath's. "This empire is finished," she said. Not a threat. A statement carved from stone. "But we have no use for ruins. You will keep order until something better replaces it." The words landed heavier than any executioner's blade. Surrender would have been cleaner. Death, even cleaner still. But to rule what had been taken, to wear authority stripped of power, was a humiliation designed to last. Zerath searched her face for triumph and found none. Only the same clinical certainty that had carried her through every battlefield. Humans had not come for vengeance. They had come for control. And they had taken it. When the human fleets withdrew days later, they left no garrisons, no occupying armies. They didn't need them. The Empire obeyed because defiance had been made obsolete. Entire sectors operated under silent human oversight now, orders delivered through channels no one could trace, infrastructure humming under guidance no one could dislodge. Zerath became governor by decree of those who had dismantled everything he'd sworn to protect. He signed the orders himself, each signature feeling like another chain settling around his throat. In the weeks that followed, human presence remained spectral yet absolute. Wormhole signatures flickered at the edges of sensor range, never close, never gone. Trade routes reopened under their watchful absence. Pirate fleets vanished overnight. Border skirmishes ceased as neighboring empires read the silence correctly. Power had shifted. Permanently. On the evening Vorinth Prime lowered the Empire's banners for the first time in 6 centuries, Zerath stood alone in the council chamber, watching workers raise a new standard, a simple black field bearing no crest at all. Human ships drifted high above, like indifferent stars. The woman joined him briefly, silent at his side. Was this war, he asked at last, or extermination? She considered before answering. Neither, she said. It was a correction. And then she was gone, leaving him with the weight of survival heavier than defeat. In the quiet that followed, Zerath understood the war had not ended with battles, but with a revelation. Humanity had never fought for conquest. They had fought to ensure no empire would ever reach for them again. Across the galaxy, old powers shrank back into their territories. New alliances formed under human shadow. Trade shifted. Borders stabilized. No parades marked humanity's rise. No monuments declared victory. But in council halls and war rooms, in the tense silences between distant empires, everyone understood the same truth. The galaxy hadn't lost a war. It had gained a warden.